We will begin the discussion of sampling by considering the thinking behind sampling. Specifically, we will define key terms and consider the notion of inference, generalizability, and other assumptions behind sampling. Mainstream approaches to sampling and their corresponding quality criteria stem from positivist epistemology. That is, sampling in quantitative research helps to develop scientific knowledge, that is, to discover truth, help to develop explanation and understanding of the world. Ideally, such knowledge should be derived from the study of entire populations. This would enable the discovery of facts, finding true parameters of the population, and finding true relationships between phenomena of interest. For example, to understand consumer loyalty, we would need to gather data from all and every consumer in the world. To explain the relationship between trust and employee commitment, we would need to examine all employees. And very occasionally we do examine entire populations. Researchers may collect and analyze data from every possible member of a population. In such instances, they carry out a census. In the UK, for example, government carries out a population census every 10 years. In management research, more often than not, we tend to access specialized populations, such as exporters or international new ventures or customers of a particular brand, and most of the time, in management research, we rely on samples. Considering research in management, census of a population may be neither possible nor desirable. For example, it may be impossible to find all members of the population, or it may be prohibitively expensive and time-consuming to survey them. In such instances, sampling techniques enable you to reduce amount of data to collect by considering a subgroup rather than all possible elements of the population. To understand sampling, you first need to be familiar with some basic sampling concepts. The two most important concepts are population and sample. The term population refers to the entire collection of people, firms, or groups to whom the findings are supposed to apply. The term sample is used to represent or estimate a property of the population based to a subset of its elements. The key consideration in sampling is that the sample represents the population accurately. An element or unit of analysis is a single entity in the population. Together, all units form a population. An element most often consists of one person, but it can also be a group, for example a team, or other entities such as household, firm, or organization. A stratum is a subset of elements from the population that share some characteristic. In the population of employees of the University of Glasgow, for example, we can distinguish a female and a male stratum. Of course, we could identify many multiple strata that may overlap. For example, male and female staff are also academic and non-academic or administrative staff. The term census refers to a enumeration or count of all elements in the population. The term could also refer to a situation where all elements in the population are actually measured. In that case, the sample consists of an entire population. The final term you need to be familiar with is the term sampling frame. A sampling frame is essentially a list of all the elements in the population that can be individually identified. A sampling frame can overlap with a census defined as an enumeration of the entire population. A sampling frame is more than a simple list of elements, however. A frame provides a way of actually contacting the elements. For example, it can be a phone or a book or a list of email addresses. For example, the list of all email addresses for staff at the University of Glasgow is one such sampling frame. Sampling is based on certain principles. At the heart of it all, as this quote illustrates, lies the notion of inference and generalizability. Sampling assumes that you will be able to infer from the sample, that is, that you will be able to extend the knowledge derived from a sample to the general population of interest. For example, in my own PhD study, I assumed that knowledge gained from a sample of British exporters may inform our understanding of exporting behaviors in all firms. This extension of knowledge concerns generalizability, and your findings are generalizable when the findings based on your research sample hold or remain true for other settings, persons, organizations, and times. To be generalizable, sample has to represent the population well. Suppose we would like to examine the relationship between trust and organizational commitments, and we sample mostly young people, and we find little effect between the two constructs. The overrepresentation of a specific part of the population can weaken the study validity. Perhaps the strong effect of trust on commitment is less apparent for young people. If our sample had been more representative of the entire employee population, we would have found a stronger effect. Our results would not be biased. In general, in quantitative research, we try to avoid bias and tend to worry about the representativeness of the sample. We tend to assume that the best samples are those that begin with all elements of the population being listed and where all elements have the same chance of being included. In essence, by conventional thinking, best samples are probability-based random samples. Saying that, the reality of management research imposes at least two corrections to these general principles. First, our surveys tend to be analytical and not descriptive. We rarely search for truths and facts in management. Rather, we tend to be interested in relationships between concepts that are abstract, and for that reason, we have high tolerance for non-random samples. The truth is not out there to be found. Secondly, it is very hard to sample randomly because sampling frames are not available. We simply do not have lists of populations that are of interest. We may not have lists of employees, consumers, managers. Also, we may be interested in narrowly defined and difficult to identify populations. For example, the populations of new ventures or female entrepreneurs or members of particular brand community. For these two reasons, convenience sampling is common in management. Nonetheless, in the next video, I'll review all approaches to sampling.